Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Oh, well, hey, everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 559 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And, dear people, Rhino Records. Let's just let that sink in for a moment. Rhino Records. We've all bought something from Rhino Records in the past, some earlier than others. I started my Rhino journey with some James Brown compilations in the 80s. And I continue to this day with the Rhino Reserve series. I don't know if you know about this, the Rhino Reserve series on vinyl. They're doing some amazing reissues. Just got me an Eddie Hazel reissue of an album I could never afford an original of. They recently reissued The Meters, Donny Hathaway Live, Baby Huey, a bunch of great titles. And Rhino has always been known for their high taste. But where did that come from? Well, today we meet the man who kicked it off, Mr. Richard Foos. Now, Richard and Rhino co-founder Harold Bronson started Rhino Records as a record shop in L.A. in 1973, eventually becoming one of the primary hubs for non-mainstream music and really helped germinating the record collecting culture. They started then reissuing classic titles, compilations, etc., at a time when very few labels were celebrating their back catalogs. And just by luck of the draw, by default, Rhino created a reissue culture, which we still enjoy today. So today we talk with Richard about that journey, discuss various aspects of it, and I think you'll agree, Richard is a wealth of knowledge, lots of stories. We get some great ones today. And hey, real quick, before we talk vinyl reissues with Richard, if you like this podcast, please follow it in your podcast app. There are like over 550 other interviews talking records, music rarities, and more. Interviews with people like Greg Ginn of Black Flag and SST Records, episode 547. Zach Wilde talked all about Ozzy's final show, Pantera's Future, and much more, episode 544. Director Dave Markey on his brilliant movie, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell, joined us, episode 549. Tootie Cole and the Legend of Dead Moon, episode 520, and literally hundreds more, all free anytime. Just follow the Vinyl Guide podcast in your podcast app. And if you want to help support the show, go to patreon.com/vinylguide. Throw us a few shekels there, and it'd be much appreciated. Alrighty, let's talk records, reissues, and more with Rhino Records co-founder Richard Foos. Well, Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show. And, you know, I've always been fascinated by Rhino Records. And so thanks for making the time. They call you king of the reissues, but you're really more kind of the Genghis Khan of reissues. The Christopher Columbus. But, you know, going out there and really kind of kickstarting the reissue, I guess, craze and culture. Is that fair? Is that a moniker you wear?
Totally. Well, a couple months ago, my first employee who was in high school and had to go through a vigorous recruitment process, he said, "Can I work here?" I said, "Sure." And anyway, he was telling me, he mentioned the words reissue culture. I said, "What's that?" He goes, "You invented it." So I said, "Okay, I invented it." I'll take that.
You did. And God, has it ever been going strong since? Now, you started as a record shop, and things just kind of budded from there. Now, this is early 70s. I want to say 73-ish, something like that.
73.
Okay. So you started the record shop in 73. What was record collecting like back then?
There really wasn't any.
Yeah.
I guess because Jeff Gold, that's the person who we hired out of high school, he started a business where he would, I guess there was one record collecting new fanzine, and he would advertise and do a classified ad if you want rare records, and he sent out a list, but it was very small. Records really weren't worth all that much, you know, a rare record. You know, retail records were $5-6. A rare record maybe was $10, a really rare record. So, well, there wasn't much, and it was really difficult to collect records or even hear music that was old. It could be 2, 3 years old. That's gone, in the ether, gone.
Yeah. So you really didn't have people that were hunting things at that point, like Blue Notes or whatever, or maybe the rare person here or there, but that was...
I bet there'd be people who'd, go around to old warehouses. You had a few collector record shops in the bigger cities. There might be, one in each city, but not much. And you could go hunting to, the handful of used record stores or Salvation Army, Goodwill, and find great records. People do talk about, the holy grail of, I went to Sun Records warehouse and there were 500 sealed, Sun records they were trying to get rid. I never found. I never found that holy grail. Yeah.
I'm still searching for it. Because again, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles, but I got a lot of friends there, and I know it seems to be the record collecting epicenter. There's always talk of like the Capitol record market and, swap meet, those sort of things where a lot of record collectors got together. Was that going when you opened the shop, or is that something that started later?
It was years later. It might have been 4 or 5 years later, more late 70s. Mm-hmm. I think what started the boom of even music fans was punk rock. It was such a DIY. Everyone could do it. Everybody could have a band. All of a sudden, you could have a band and you could be playing in the clubs. And there's very little, even the biggest band like X. Now it's, we look on these rock stars as like gods, particularly in the punk era. Mm-hmm. There was very little distance. There weren't like green rooms at these clubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Al's bar that was in the basement of they were grungy and you were all like packed in together.
Was Rhino Records a bit of a gathering place for
Absolutely.
punk? Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
The sort of people you'd have in John Doe, Darby Crash, they'd darken your door.
Darby Crash used to come in the store and crash. He'd be like throwing shit. He was Darby Crash, and we had to ban him from the store.
Oh no!
So he was insane, and we'd have like our worst customer list. And he was up there, #1 band forever. So, and, the Ramones came in a couple times when they'd be touring, and Ramones were playing, like small clubs. They weren't like. They were just another we're a punk band, they were exalted because from New York and whatnot. But
mm-hmm.
It was really a different thing, Sam. So, and there weren't a lot of places that were carrying punk. Any band that had most bands didn't have the money for albums,
right.
to press albums, so they pressed 45s. We'd say any band that you want to put up, give your records to us on consignment, we'll take them. And we'll display them, and they sold. Okay. Because they were the only places where you could buy, and every, Devo, I think they put out their own record single, and nobody, the major labels were scouting these bands,
So you'd have the whole set of Danger House singles. You'd get all the Bomp stuff, pretty much everything Absolutely. That they had that you guys would stock.
Right, you're selling them for $1.
It's clear that there was a pivot at some point to be able to start to go from selling records to compiling and releasing reissues. What was the first major reissue for you? Was that the James Brown? What?
Probably James Brown. Yeah.
Okay.
It was really, really major, and it was amazing. So James Brown is a great example of where the industry was in 1979. Basically, 100% of James Brown's records were out of print. So
you had to find the old King records,
right? Except for his new album,
right?
But you wouldn't find them sealed. You'd find them in these. If you're I'm going to intuit that if you're not in LA or New York or San Francisco, and there's not some kind of underground scene, that maybe, let's take Indianapolis, there probably wasn't a used record store, or maybe there was one, and they'd have a small selection, so you'd have to be lucky that they would have if you wanted to hear James Brown music, there's not no stations, there's no oldies stations, nobody's playing it, except if you can find an old record, which was anything but easy to do. So pretty much this music's out of print, unavailable to be heard, et cetera, until we put out a James Brown Greatest Hits, and it sold really well. And then CDs, by 82, 83, CDs are overtaking LPs, and Polygram Records gave us the rights to put it on CD, and then we sold hundreds of thousands and had it for a few years till they say, why are we licensing it to Rhino? We can just put it on ourselves.
So when you first got the idea to reissue James Brown, how difficult was that process? I guess they weren't even sure what they had or what they could do with it. They were fairly open to just...
Yes,
yeah,
because the major labels had licensing departments because people needed to license music for films. There was companies like KTEL that was doing, some of these compilations, a variety. So they had to have a licensing division, but they never thought about reissuing the music themselves. Couldn't be any, so they'd have more of a administrative person, not a creative person, running the licensing department that was kind of in the basement of the record companies. And,
yeah.
And they were just order takers. So we say, okay, we want to license James Brown Greatest Hits, and they let us do it. In their defense, if something was still selling, we're not getting Sgt. Pepper's or, that's still in print, or, Led Zeppelin, all those records are still in print, but then the next level down, they're all out of print.
Right. But like the Led Zeppelins or the Pink Floyd, those are the top 1%.
We're not getting
or
those.
Whatever, but there was the whole iceberg below the surface that was available. Now, did they give you, like, once you do the license, they give you the tapes? Like, how does that happen?
They let us go in their vaults, and we would insist we would only put a record out if we could go into the vaults and get the original master tapes, and whether it be LP or CD, and master from those tapes. Now, it's not done. It's too much work. So it's funny when you're getting an LP reissue with the hope that you're hearing the original analog source. You're not. You're hearing a digital.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of takes if analog sounds better, you're not getting it.
Yeah. But you do the license, you do the deal, they let you in the vaults, and then here you are, just a young guy getting handed the master tape of Cold Sweat and Funky Drummer and everything to do your thing. So, okay.
Exactly. And sometimes I think he still does a lot of work for Rhino and other companies. Bill Aitlott, who was like a master tape, sound engineer and whatever. And sometimes if the original master tape was missing, they'd let us use the multi-tracks. But Bill, to his credit, would never change it. He'd listen to the original, and even if the bass was too low in the original recording and it would sound better if it was right, he would not fool with it. It was all about restoring the original recording so it would sound the best that you've ever heard it.
Yeah, ultimate purist there.
Yeah. And even in those days, as record collectors, you would know this more than me, that look at the inscription on the disc to see how early in the pressing run it was pressed. And obviously, the earlier it was, the better it would sound.
Okay, so you guys were very deep into that, even the stamper numbers back then.
No, we weren't.
Okay.
But I'm saying there are record collectors who get into the stamper numbers, and they're right that if it's the beginning of the run of a stamper, it's going to sound better than the end of a run of a stamper. I don't know. The human ear could discern it, but they are correct. But we would never use a stamper or a secondary tape. We'd always get the original master tape, and that's what we would master from.
Were there any projects that you tried to put out that back in the day, they just didn't have the tapes. They would have made the deal, but you just weren't able to get all the materials to put it together?
Yeah, there were a few, and then sometimes if we couldn't license, like I can't remember if it was after I left or right at the end, but for years we didn't put out a punk rock box set because we couldn't get the Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, and our since passed away head of A&R was one. If we can't get that, we're not doing it.
Oh, okay.
That was funny. He did let us put out. Oh no, in the original Nuggets album, this informed a lot of what we did. That was the first great, wonderful, researched, original tapes, unbelievable sounding reissue. And that was before us. So it was 72. So we reissued. So they were not, the one song they were not able to get on the original Nuggets because famous Alan Klein would license it. It is 96 Tears by Question Mark and the Mysterians. And recently Rhino reissued Nuggets and got the rights for 96 Tears. So that
the puzzle's back together now.
yeah. So that, occasionally there were songs we couldn't get, or again, we couldn't get the master recording. And, and once in a while, I can't say if we're putting out, 100 song doo-wop box and a couple of the songs we can't find the master tapes, we might have mastered from other sources. So but 99% of the time, we insisted on the original master.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how did you develop the ear for sequencing? Because it's not just dumping things in chronological order. I mean, there was an art to, one in front of the other, and being able to, as a listener, to be able to hear the history in a sequence that made the most sense.
So I think our secret was we had grown up my partner and I, on listening to the radio, being part of the music zeitgeist, and we would follow the same way of that. Nobody bought a lot of albums. You couldn't afford a lot of albums. So most of the arc of 60s artists, if they weren't the 1% that could jump decades, like maybe the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, most of them, their careers start to wane by the third or fourth album. And then the record labels would, at that point, they were smart enough, they'd put out a greatest hits album. And we'd buy that greatest hits album. And they were always lacking because it was, the dirty secret of the music business is it's adults trying to figure out what kids want. That they're not in their DNA. They usually hate the music. So you can't tell me that the heads of record companies, especially in the 90s and zeros, love rap. So it was like adults, compiling these greatest hits albums, and they hated the music, so they didn't know what.
They didn't understand it. They were like,
they knew, right? They knew what the hits were because they sold it. But once you get past the obvious ones, they don't know what the best records or what a pleasurable listening experience would be. But we did. We knew what was lacking in what they did. We knew these bands so backwards and forward. We knew, the 4 or 5 Turtle songs that were almost hits, but didn't make it, but were still great records. And so we knew it was just so in our DNA, what a good album would be like, what it would sound like, and how to compile it. So,
yeah, because you guys were fans and you understood I guess what other fans were looking for, or maybe went with your gut a lot. But anyway, yeah, the sequencing of Rhino records has always been something that to me has been impressive because there seemed to be a philosophy behind it. Introducing a listener, and I bought that James Brown reissue when I was a youngling, and that taught me a lot about James Brown. It was, and I think if you would have started with just his old stuff in chronological order, I probably would have tapped out early.
Interesting.
So it was welcoming to the newbie as well.
Wow. Right. No, that's great to hear. I didn't even totally realized that.
Yeah. It's like the movie opening. You got to capture them in the first few minutes, otherwise, they go somewhere else.
Right.
So was there ever a reissue that happened, but everyone tried to talk you out of?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I was the only one my favorite music was doo-wop music. So I was right on the bubble of being a 50s guy and a 60s guy. Started listening to music in 1960 and then went backwards into the 50s. And so I always had wanted to do a box set of the greatest doo-wop songs, but no one else at the company liked doo-wop. And even I thought, this is just a vanity project and it's going to lose money because, it's fairly expensive to do. This will be a 4 CD, 100-song box set. And we put it out. I waited about 3-4 years to put it out till we were financially solvent enough to lose some money. And it basically was by far the best-selling box set we ever had. I don't know if it still is, but hundreds of thousands of units. I know it at the same time, a Beach Boys box set had come out on Capitol, had outsold the Beach Boys box set. We went on and did a PBS flood show that was the premium. It was still the biggest grossing PBS show in history. It did at the PBS level, they're charging hundreds of dollars. It did over $100 million, which I'm sure they can really use today. They're being defunded. So that was, and people just left. It just touched the nerve. It was, doo-wop was New York City street folk music, and it just touched the nerve.
And this was early 80s, this one?
Probably late 80s, mid to late 80s.
Okay, all right. Because that nostalgia cycles seem to go every 20 to 25 years, something like that. And I've always chalked it up to when you're a teenager or late teens, early 20s, that music that really kind of sweetened your life. Then you go through the era of having a family or having a mortgage or something where you can't get it. And then 20 years later, all of a sudden you're empowered to be able to revisit that. You hearken back to, this youth that you want to revisit, and music tends to be a key factor in that. So that's the story that I've told myself. What's really popular right now will probably be very collectible in 20, 25 years when people that are young today start missing their youth. Is that right. Is that something you would kind of agree with, or do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember I had a nephew who was saying, he's in his early 40s, and he'd say, God, does the music suck today? It's not great like it was in the 90s. And I'm sure there's now people waxing poetic about those great zeros, not trap it is today. And
that's some of the most collectible records right now. Some of the records that are out of the and it's also a big help to the collector community that they didn't press that much vinyl in the early
there's
2000s.
Almost no vinyls in the zeros.
Yeah, so if you have an original Smashing Pumpkins from back then, that's a car payment right there. That's
wow.
Yeah. Do you keep up with record collecting culture these days?
No, I don't. And doing some of these podcasts, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
So I was I'm one who said, showing me the Rhino hi-fi series and saying this is the gold standard of the reissues today. And I was so proud that the legacy is still being carried on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you guys also struck it. I always assumed that there was a strong record collecting muscle behind it because you knew how people wanted to deep dive into the music, like putting in outtakes, rarities, things that would be on the cutting room floor of most mastering labs, mastering studios. Yeah.
All we cared about was, did you take a genre or a group that we're going to give you the hits for sure. We always insisted the hits are on it, and then below that, we're going to give you the best. We listened to everything. We were there at the time, and we're re-listening to everything, and we're going to give you, I guess, our opinion of the best listening experience and best experience you're going to have with whatever group you mentioned.
Yeah, but you also gave an education. There was a booklet. There was information. There were pictures.
Absolutely. Right.
And outtakes and things that probably would have only been on B-sides. Or I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably found some interesting stuff while you were going through the tape vaults.
We did. But we weren't the label for the deep collectors. There were other labels.
Yeah.
And doing that, like, would only put on outtakes and only do rarities. Once in a while we do a rarities album, but very rarely. We were about the best listening, not the rarest, the best listening experience. If they were rare, that's great. But they weren't rarity. We didn't put on rarities for rarity's sake.
Yeah. Now, a lot of those rarity records were probably produced by bootleggers. Did you have much of a relationship with bootleggers, or how did you guys interact in that world?
Well, truth be told, 2 years before I even had a record store, I was going to swap meets, and the biggest grossing booth at the swap meet was somebody selling bootleg records, which turned out to be the guy making them. So I had a friend's family's electronics store that I said, I could sell used records and some bootlegs. And this was in a mall that was abandoned. Later became the most popular mall in the country, the Santa Monica Promenade. But at the time, it was abandoned. And so you'd really have to be into surplus electronics and then buying the bin in the store that had the bootleg. So I had a relationship with the bootlegger. And amazingly enough, a very famous underground comic artist, Bill Stout, was the first. The bootlegger was smart enough to start. The original bootleggers, they just had a rubber stamp that said "Great White Wonder," and this guy said, maybe we'll sell more if we do a little artwork. And Bill Stout was the first underground bootleg artist who became one of the biggest sci-fi fantasy poster artists that campaigns for Star Wars movies and the Spielberg movies.
Yeah, and he did the Rhino logo, as I understand.
That's true.
Yeah. So you ran in some. You had friends in high and low places there.
Yes. Mostly low.
So you were actually, for early days, pre-Rhino shop, you were actually selling some bootlegs or involved in that. Any close calls?
More than a close call, I was arrested.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, the funny thing was, I was arrested and paid a fine for selling bootlegs because we would have a sale every year for the store, and we'd stop selling bootlegs, but we'd spruce. When we have our big warehouse sale, we'd spruce in a few big bootlegs, and the RIA just happened to be at the sale, and the next day they pulled up the biggest truck I'd ever seen in my life. Invade our store and with FBI agents and the whole bit, and they found about 30 bootlegs, and I got arrested, and it was later. What's the word? Nolo contendere, but it was enough that years later, for the hell of it, I signed up to be a volunteer policeman. It's for the hell of it. When they asked me as I'm signing up, have you ever been arrested? I go, yeah, but it was 40 years ago, and it was Nolo contendere, etc. He goes, well, you're not old.
So
I said, you'd find it, the computer will, you're out. So I couldn't be a cop.
Wow. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I think they've updated the rules. You could probably try again.
Okay.
So, wow. Okay. So you actually got arrested got in trouble for it. And this
there was a place where I went and I was proactive because we were licensing from the record companies. And, there was an article in Billboard about it. And so I called every record company who we licensed from and say, look, it was 30 records. It was an accident. It's no low contender. I'm free. Anyway, one of the heads of Columbia Records, the guy who we had license from, is sitting on the plane with his boss, who's about reading through Billboard. And he takes the Billboard from him. You don't need to see that, so he doesn't find out that that I had been arrested. So it blew over. It was fine.
Oh, that's amazing. So you did have those sort of connections in that in that area. The TMOQ guys, I would imagine.
That was who it was. Yeah.
Tim. Okay. All right.
He's written. I think he wrote a autobiography about those days, and it's good.
We had him on the show.
Pretty well.
Yeah.
Was it Ken Douglas?
Well, they go under pseudonyms.
Taylor and Ted.
Yeah, they go under pseudonyms. They're still not comfortable.
Oh.
Truly.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a lot.
It's funny. I'll send you the interview.
Well, the amazing thing is they were providing a need, and they were part of the, fan culture, music fan culture, and the record labels, even starting in the mid 70s, started really controlling the careers. They thought, okay, you could have even the biggest hit artist every 3 years, you could have an album out. So if you're a fan, the most you can spend on an artist, unless you can maybe find a T-shirt or something, is $6. And yet there were all these live concerts that people would have loved to buy if the record company, people didn't want to buy bootlegs. If they were out from the record companies, they would have bought, but the record companies wanted to control it and limit. They didn't understand fandom now they do.
Yeah. If I'm a Stooges fan, I want to hear, more than those 2 or 3 records. I want to hear their live show. And I'm not going to take that money and now, give it to buy Pat Benatar or anything. I want more. I want more Stooges, damn it. More ego.
Right, exactly. They just didn't get it because, again, they weren't the fans. They were the business guys, and they didn't want to flood the market. And I've heard horror stories from artists that had hit records when they're ready to drop their next record, and then record companies, no, it's not time. And the record company's got to format it out. We have 6 hit artists. We can't put them all out at the same time. So they ruin the artist's career because it's all timing and whatever. And so there's a documentary about Blood, Sweat, and Tears that's great. But they had the biggest selling band, had 4, top 10 records, and they wait 2 or 3 years to put out their next record, and it's over. So not
completely cooled off.
The sound's different and everything. Yeah. And they never were able to, I think they had a couple more hits, and then what was it?
Now, the whole vinyl revival of the last, let's say 15, 20 years, has that surprised you that people have gone back to vinyl the way they have?
I love it, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
I never would have considered in a million years. It just shows there's something really spiritual about an album that just people love it. I've heard that over half of albums sold are never opened.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
People just, I think in a lot of ways, they want to support an artist and they value something physical to hold.
Right. And if they like the cover, it's artwork in your home, and where else, you're paying $30 and a frame, it's still cheap artwork. Yeah.
Because I guess the assumption, the culture around music and availability has changed so much. You mentioned in the early 70s, I grew up in kind of the mid 70s, where you had to capture the song on the radio on a cassette. Otherwise, you may not hear it again, or you don't know when you'll get an opportunity to do it.
Sure. And just similar to how the record industry almost destroyed itself by suing Napster and not offering an alternative, they had a mantra that was, they put it on albums and everything. Home taping is killing our business.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't. It was seeding their business.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Back in my day, we had to kind of capture the music. So it was either you buy the record and you didn't have, you had a finite amount of money. So, a lot of times you had to try to capture it on a cassette or something like that. And there was a scarcity, a feeling of scarcity there. Now within the years of streaming have come around, and for a while there wasn't the urge to own until a lot of the streaming services started tapping out of their licenses, and then some music you couldn't get anymore on streaming. So it made it more difficult. We're starting to kind of see it with movies. We used to be able to turn on Netflix and The Godfather 1 and 2 were right there, no problem. And then you turn it on the next month and they're gone. How do you feel the culture of media, absorption will continue to evolve? Like, what do you think it'll look like? Is streaming the nirvana, or where do you think it'll look like in another 10 years?
Yeah, I think streaming is the nirvana. And again, I just want to hear great music and see great films and TV, and the more accessible, the better. And I just can't even believe in YouTube. Like an obscure song will pop into my mind, and it'll 99% of the time be available on YouTube. It'll be an artist that didn't even have a hit, and there'll be 30 more songs.
Yeah.
And that artist, I go, wow. So I don't think the studios or the record companies went willingly, but at some point it was so easy for everyone to load their stuff on YouTube and other similar services that the genie was out of the bottle. And so now they're allowing, through their, what we call metrics, they can put up, at their algorithms, they can put up and capture, get the revenue from all their catalogs.
Yeah. All these artists that are selling their catalogs for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, do you think the value of those catalogs are going to grow significantly over the coming decades?
No, we're always seeing they just go down. There's no, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll just go down. We won't live forever. And maybe Led Zeppelin will be remembered, and maybe that. But in general, people will forget. In the same way, I bet most kids have never, teenagers, college, have never heard of Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
He's by far the biggest of our parents' generation. He was all the time.
I always think, who are the artists that people 100 years from now are going to be talking about?
And the Beatles for sure.
I think Nirvana has a good chance because there's the whole story around it as well. The flaming out of Kurt. But yeah, not that many. No,
I don't know if Led Zeppelin would or not. But yeah. I don't think they would. It was, to me, the whole thing of Led Zeppelin is they were the first, free heavy metal, hard rock. They just rock. Even though we listen to it now and it doesn't say, what's the big deal? When it came out, there was nothing even remotely, I was scared. It had dark energy, but it's been eclipsed, by so much darker and louder music. I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a reissue that you started with and it got botched up?
Well, I'll tell you, after I left Rhino, for a few years, the record nerds took over.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the editors anymore at the top. And the record nerds took over, and there were things like they put out a LA Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
Record collectors weren't there at the time. They didn't know what music was played on the underground radio stations, what bands were the secondary bands in club. And they put out a pure, released, rare demos, rarity box set. It was a terrible listen. It was really unhappy because LA not just would have been my favorite thing ever to compile, and I just think I could have done an amazing, job on it. We never went that deep to just do an LA the box set. So there were a few times, and again, it was so against our ethos of how you do it. But once the record collectors are trying to impress other record collectors about all these great deep rarities, and which we always did, but you got to put the best music as well. So
Yeah, comedians call that playing to the back of the room.
for other comedians,
Yeah.
like for other comedians.
Yeah. Did you ever go back and forth with an artist or an estate over what was included? Any complexities in dealing with that?
Here's one that we never did. So one of my favorite artists I would have loved to do a best of those on many labels was Kinky Friedman. Mm-hmm. Never had a hit record, but loves his music. And he said, so we met with him, which I idolize, so that was amazing. And he said, we said we want to do a best of. He said, no effing way. I hate how I did those songs. I do them so much better now. And that was the kiss of death. We were going to put out a re-recording of how
86 version of whatever.
Yeah. And so that, it would have sold not very well anyway. We would have loved to do it, but we encountered that a few times with ours. So that was trash. That was trash. Now I know how to play it, but I don't understand what you said about when you first hear it as a teenager and it's magic. You don't want to hear pre-recordings where it now has strings or
I can't tell you how many times War has redone Lowrider. But Lowrider 99, Lowrider 2001. There's probably 12 different versions, but that first version, you can't capture that magic again. It's just yeah. Even the room noise or things around it, if they played it perfectly the same way, it's just not the same.
Absolutely.
Any strange conditions ever put on licensing material? Yeah, you could do this, but you also have to include this or some other strange thing that was required a hoop to jump through?
Well, there were many artists, the absurdity of like many artists, and particularly the bigger artists that wouldn't allow their songs to be compiled with other songs. So if we wanted to put out a greatest singer-songwriter, we probably couldn't get a Bruce Springsteen track. But now you see the absurd one. Even then, anybody could home tape whatever collection they wanted. So Bruce Springsteen would have no control over a cassette, and had him with, the most right-wing country artist, Lee Greenwood, doing "God Bless USA" with "Born in the USA." You'd have no control over, and now you really have no control over. But on an actual album, many artists had no coupling clauses. So it was hard. We never could get Dylan on a best of folk compilation so that was that was an issue. And sometimes we could. We talked to the manager, we talked to the artist and convinced them.
Was it more difficult tracking, or securing music and audio rights than it became with video rights? Because you went to the Shout Factory, so I imagine it's a very similar challenge, only audio and video.
Well, on video, the challenge was music clearances.
Yeah.
That challenge enabled us to put out things that nobody else would be crazy enough to put out. So one example, the first great show that we reissued was Freaks and Geeks. Mm-hmm. And nobody would dare touch it because they were 80 gigantic hit songs from the 60s and in the early 70s, Who songs and things that. So I believe it was owned by Paramount, and the creator producer Judd Apatow really wanted it out on DVD. This is when DVD there wasn't streaming.
Yeah.
Really, DVD was the only delivery system other than broadcast for older shows, and so it never been out. But Paramount said, "Okay, if you can clear it, you can put it out." And we cleared every single song, and it was not easy. But you have to, when you clear music, it has to be both the master and the publishing. So you need, and sometimes the artist. So you need 2 to 3 clearances for every song that's going to go on a show. And that the irony of ironies was we later got the rights for WKRP in Cincinnati, which the main selling point of the show is the first show about a 70s FM station that used real music. So when I think it was Fox put out the show on, maybe it was VHS or DVD, they replaced the music. So it was like put in fake music.
Yeah.
So it allowed us to go back and restore the original real music. So we took the film and TV, we took this exact same, at Shout Factory, we took the exact same philosophy, same thing, remastering from original sources. With DVD, the great thing is you could put on oodles. You weren't restricted to the 75 minutes of a CD or 45 minutes of an LP. You could put in as many extras as you want. So we had commentaries, interviews with the stars, outtakes, the pilot episode, et cetera, et cetera. So we were able to, again, super serve the fan.
Yeah. It's the same way that you made that James Brown compilation and introduced people to it. It's WKRP. That's the definitive collection. If you want to go to that show, that's where you go.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about working with Frank Zappa, because I remember the Beat the Boot series.
Yes.
Was that primarily how you worked with Zappa, or were there?
Primarily, we put out a couple of his newer albums, but we were able to effectuate a deal for the catalog, which we had a option on, and when he passed away, we passed on it, and which I'm sorry.
Well, Rhino got it, but so it was kind of there was several parties at hand that were kind of fine for it.
Rhino got it, yeah. So we worked with him on the Beat the Boot spot, and Zappa was great to work with, fun, great having conversations with him, going to his house, which was kind of like the Addams Family mansion. It's like this old mansion. He had his, ball in the basement, and it was great. Yeah. But anyway, his genius was he was the only artist that, again, he understood his fandom, and his idea was Beat the Boots was just to bootleg the bootleggers and put everything out. If they did a crappy job on it, we'd put out a crappy job. So we would undermine the bootleggers, and every artist should have done that. And he really is almost the only one. The Dead as well, and the Doors, but very few artists really understood that, and it was a lot of fun working with them.
Yeah, that was genius. And even just mimic their artwork and the whole package put together.
Exactly.
Plus, you gotta.
And the bootlegger's not going to sue you for bootlegging his.
And if you bought the box, you got a beret with it, so that was handy.
And, one of them we had a big pop up, like those greeting cards that pop up.
What was the most elaborate package that you remember working on?
Well, we had a genius compiler artist, Hugh Brown, who was only into insanely elaborate packages. So there was like the 70s Have a Nice Day box set with the shag carpet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm forgetting some of his more elaborate packages. He he did the first thing we did with him was Sex Stars Sing or something like that. That was male, all the bombshells of the 50s and 60s, like Jane Mansfield, Mamie Van Doren, Marilyn Monroe, Sophia Loren, that had tried to be recording artists, but it was on, pink vinyl. Yeah, just all kinds of dipsy-doos that, with a giant, obviously great picture book with sexy pictures along.
Yeah. You ever try to do different perfumes or different things you would try?
Yeah. Oh, we had perfume. Yes.
Okay.
Perfume on the record. And we really tried to screw around with vinyl. We tried to have fun with vinyl. So we did things. And I think I've heard Jack White has done, of his pressing plants, has done crazy things with vinyl. But we had one that played inside out. We played from the inside to the outside.
Yep.
We did, in those days, it was hard to sell comedy records because everyone said, hey, it plays the same every time. So we did an album with the comedian Henny Youngman, and we used something called Trick Track. So it was 4 different master tracks on the album, and depending on where you put the needle down, we would play a different track all the time. So we promoted it as the one album, comedy album that always plays different.
Oh, I never realized it. Those hidden grooves where you could find a secret song or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so everything we could think of that you could do that was fun. The Temple City Kazoo Orchestra, which was our biggest hit novelty record for the first few years, we did one of the 4 songs was Miss You, so we did it on disco vinyl. And it was, so it looked like a disco ball.
Uh-huh.
And, picture discs, anything we could think of, to have fun with vinyl, we did.
Yeah. Oh, it just sounds like such an amazing place, like a Willy Wonka kind of environment.
Yeah, we did, we put hologram, we did holograms early. We did a surf box set and did a 3D postcard with a beach babe coming at you in 3D on the cover. So, but we wanted to make not only a great listening experience, but have fun with it too.
So. Oh yeah, there was always something kind of, interesting when you get a Rhino set and you knew that it came from people who knew what they were doing and you were going to learn something from it, even if it was a record that, how I stumbled into James Brown. I didn't know what to expect, but you guys led the way, and I've been forever grateful. So Richard, what sort of things are you looking forward to? What sort of projects are you involved in?
I still, Shot Factor, we sold most of the company to private equity company 2 years ago. They merged us with another company, and now it's called Radial. And I'm still a consultant, so I do, I'm still coming up with ideas for reissues and talking to the acquisitions, person. There's still things that are uncovered, and so I'm still working on that. And what I mainly do is I started my career, I was a child of the 60s, and I really bought into the one world, we got to give back, help your fellow citizen, and always, was doing community work. And I've kind of gone back to that. And I just do nonprofit work, including my wife has something called the narrative method, which is addressing what I've always wanted to address, the crisis of connection. And through her work, connecting people mostly on Zoom through creativity and storytelling. You meet people we've had a few people from Australia, come, but people from all over the country. And other thing, and I'm working on a podcast that's going to be called Why Music Matters, and it's going to give the story of music songs and music movements that were integrated with whatever was going on politically and sociologically at the time. So protest music and how it's, shaped our society and world.
Oh, wow. Excellent. When do we get to hear that?
Oh, it's just probably a few months away. Still working. Still working out, trying to gather all the living tribes to help tell the story.
Yeah.
And with these things, there's so much for me still to learn. That's why I love YouTube. Like, we don't really, there's so much about music we still don't know. Like, the more I dig into learning about the blues and the history of the blues, we know nothing about it. Everything we think we know about it is untrue. We don't know what the truth is, but it didn't just come from slave songs and, the folk music, musicians playing in honky tonk. They were really just playing whatever they thought people wanted to hear. What they didn't make up the blues. We don't really know where it came from. It's all when you hear origin stories. You hear even like W.C. Handy said. Everybody said there was this little black guy playing on the streets, playing this song. I couldn't believe what I heard, and that and that led them into being a musician. Mm-hmm. So, where that black guy is sitting on the street playing, hear the music and how did it evolve? We don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. An interesting guest you may want to have is Taj Mahal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't even think about him. Yeah.
No, we just had him on the show and he goes deep, man.
Wow. He's a real music. Yes. Oh my God. I didn't even think about him.
Yeah. All good. Well, Richard, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor, and I appreciate the way that you and your cohort has shaped me over the years. Welcome you back anytime you want to share any updates with the audience, any projects. Please, come on, let's nerd out.
Right. And I want to give a shout out to my partner at Rhino, Harold Bronson, who I didn't talk about a lot, but totally instrumental in every part of how we evolved and did it together. So it was a wonderful partnership.
Yeah. Oh, quick question for you. The Rhino Records, it was in Claremont, now in Montclair. That's totally unrelated to the shop or the operation, yeah?
Totally related.
Totally related?
Yeah. The Claremont was our second store. We had a store in Westwood. And then we, a couple years, 76, I think we opened the store in Claremont.
Okay.
And then we sold it. So haven't owned it since 1979 or 80 or
got it.
But it's the same manager who's owned it forever. And the funny thing about it is, I didn't even realize this. Montclair is right next to Claremont.
It's very confusing.
And I didn't realize it's Claremont backwards.
Yeah.
And they're twin cities. And it was an eerie thing. One night, I was driving to the desert, and I realized, and I got a little lost. I'm an electric vehicle. I realized I didn't have enough. I had to recharge. I'd never done that before. I pull off just the next exit, and then I pull into a shopping center, and it's now midnight, so there's Rhino Record. I'd never seen the Montclair store, and it was a little seedy, so you're pulling in the middle of nowhere, and there's, a couple of people charging next to me, and it was a very odd, kind of dark scheme, but it's odds that I'd be
a full circle moment in life.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Richard, be well, and please come back anytime. Love to have a chat.
Absolutely well.
Okay.
All right.
Man.
Thank you.
Lovely man, that Richard Foos. I bet you there's a jillion more stories in that head of his. He also did the whole project. We didn't even talk about it. Shout Factory, where pretty much what Rhino did for music and vinyl reissues, they did for television series, bringing back a lot of television shows from our youth. So we can enjoy on DVD, Blu-ray, etc. So that is a guy who definitely has an eye to the future. Thank you, Richard. You're welcome back to the show anytime. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, giving us positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, you absolute saints who are supporting us on patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. All that loving is certainly appreciated. We'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves. And thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.